The kingdom of Barao falls into ruin as the royal castle is engulfed in flames and chaos. Princess Juno and the king flee for their lives while armed guards pursue them through the dim corridors. A sudden trip sends the white-haired princess sprawling to the floor as their ruthless pursuers close the distance. Desperation fills Juno's eyes as she screams for her father to leave her behind and save himself. Horrified screams echo as a blade cruelly slashes through the air, striking Juno's father down in cold blood. A gruesome spray of blood marks the end of the king's life, leaving Juno trembling in shock and disbelief. Clack! The heavy footsteps of a commander approach as the black-haired Leif stands over the fallen, traumatized princess. Tears well in Juno's eyes as she stares at the man she once trusted, now her father's murderer. Leif coldly presses his blood-stained sword against Juno's throat, declaring that her turn to face death has arrived. Juno cries out in agony, demanding to know why the man she loved would betray her family so heartlessly. With a chillingly indifferent gaze, Leif mocks her for only realizing his true intentions when it is far too late. In a tender memory from the past, the king comforted a sickly young Juno, promising her a bright future. Despite her frail health, the young princess spent her days diligently studying and writing at her desk. Years later, a vibrant Princess Juno Nesbit radiated joy, eagerly welcoming a visitor to the sunlit palace gardens. The second prince of Elist, Leif Eubank, appeared as a kind and doting suitor, expressing how much he missed her. Surrounded by blooming roses, the two shared a moment of pure, seemingly perfect romantic bliss within an ornate frame. Soft blushes and lingering glances suggested a deep mutual affection between the princess and her charming foreign prince. Barao and Elest were once close allies, their histories intertwined as neighboring kingdoms within the prosperous Floristan region. Deep-rooted political and religious influences shaped the kingdoms, symbolized by the crowning of rulers and the prayers of the people. The weight of the crown represented the solemn duty of a king to govern and protect his sovereign nation. To solidify their alliance, Leif knelt before the king, prepared to become Juno's husband and the future ruler of Barao. In the quiet beauty of the palace grounds, Leif reached into his coat to present Juno with a special gift. Juno beamed with delight as Leif revealed a precious ring, her heart full of hope for their shared future. She playfully showed off a ribbon he had given her previously, proving how much she cherished every token of his affection. Leif pulled her into a warm embrace, acting the part of the devoted protector while Juno found comfort in his arms. A mountain of books symbolized the long hours spent learning the laws and customs of their two neighboring nations. Juno spoke of her heartfelt wish to join their families and bring lasting happiness to her beloved father. Leif's gentle touch and reassuring smile masked the dark ambitions hidden beneath his noble and handsome exterior. Under a golden sunset, the couple shared a passionate kiss before Leif departed for a mandatory military inspection. A sudden, cheerful greeting interrupted the scene as a brown-haired man came running toward the royal couple. Ed Griffiths, Leif's loyal right-hand man, arrived with a bright smile, noting the undeniable closeness between the two lovers. Light-hearted banter and embarrassed blushes filled the air as the three friends enjoyed a rare moment of peace together. Juno looked toward the horizon, dreaming of the day she and Leif would build a prosperous Barao side by side. Elist was a nation that prized military strength and austerity, often keeping its soldiers away for long training deployments. In a final, tender moment before his departure, Leif held Juno close and asked her for a solemn promise. The dream shatters as the story returns to the present, where Leif looms over Juno with a cold, unsheathed blade. Towering over her, Leif cruelly reminds the princess that her very life now rests entirely within the palm of his hand. Clang! The engagement ring falls to the floor, echoing the finality of their broken bond as Leif looks down in silence. Leif ruthlessly annuls their engagement and offers a horrific ultimatum: immediate execution or marriage to the man who killed her father. The choice is presented in the darkest terms, forcing Juno to contemplate a life tied to her father's cold-blooded executioner. Overcome by grief and fury, Juno chooses death over dishonor, screaming for him to end her life right there. Grip. Juno seizes the sharp blade with her bare hands, drawing blood as she dares him to finish the deed. Ed rushes onto the scene, his face etched with panic as he shouts for Leif to stop the senseless violence. With a pained expression, Ed refuses to stand by, intervening to prevent the total destruction of the Barao royal line. The imagery of crossed swords and bloody flags warns that the fall of Barao would lead to endless, meaningless bloodshed. Ed pleads with the princess to stay alive, arguing that her survival is essential for the sake of her suffering people. He urges her to endure the humiliation, reminding her that as long as she breathes, she still has the power to act. As Juno stares up at Ed, the word revenge burns in her mind, igniting a new, dark purpose within her soul. Leif scoffs at her defiance, arrogantly claiming that a frail princess like her poses no threat to a man of his strength. Closing her eyes amidst a bed of flowers, Juno prepares to endure the nightmare, her heart now set on a path of vengeance. A warm vision of the King of Barao represents Princess Juno's cherished memories of her gentle, loving father. In a bittersweet memory, the black-haired Leif appears as a devoted fiancé, masking the betrayal yet to come. The warmth of the past dissolves into an oppressive darkness as Juno prepares to face her grim new reality. Looming over the fallen princess, Leif stares down coldly while a single candle flickers between them in the shadows. Choosing survival for the sake of vengeance, the blue-haired Juno stoically declares her intent to become Leif's wife. With a chillingly arrogant smirk, the black-haired man accepts her decision, while issuing a dark, cryptic warning. A sudden, firm grip. Leif pulls Juno toward him, his overwhelming presence signaling his complete victory over her life. Ting! The sound of the engagement ring hitting the floor echoes as Leif bites Juno's finger in a cruel gesture. Displaying her injured hand, the black-haired commander demands that she take a new ring to mark her submission. Horrified by his beastly behavior, Juno realizes with a heavy heart that the man she once loved is gone. Standing before the cold weight of her father's death, Juno vows to endure any humiliation to achieve her revenge. A vengeful fire ignites in Juno's red eyes as she promises to make Leif regret keeping her by his side. Gong! The tolling bells of the wedding tower signal the start of a ceremony Juno never truly desired. Gyak! The heavy doors of the cathedral swing open, revealing a path illuminated by a blinding, artificial light. Dressed in a pristine white uniform, Leif waits at the altar for the bride whose family he ruthlessly destroyed. Beneath her delicate lace veil, the princess remains stoic, reflecting on the horrific turn her life has taken. An oppressive darkness takes over the scene, marking a transition into a story stained deeper than royal blood. Returning to a few hours earlier, a confined Juno sits alone in the dim, silent shadows of her chamber. Staring out the window, she despairs for the safety of the castle staff and the citizens of her fallen kingdom. Memories of the rebellion haunt her, recalling the moment she was forced into submission by Leif's cold blade. Trapped in an unfamiliar room, she is denied even the basic right to mourn her father's cold-blooded murder. A childhood memory surfaces where her father once forbade her from entering certain areas for her own safety. Despair deepens as she realizes how little she truly knew about the castle's secrets or her fiancé's true nature. Visuals of her father's end and Leaf's betrayal clash in her mind, fueling her growing sense of isolation. Click. The sound of the door opening breaks her train of thought as she looks toward the unexpected visitor. Ed Griffiths enters the room with a pained expression, offering a hollow apology to the grieving, captive princess. Juno stands to face him in chilling silence, her cold demeanor reflecting the shattered trust between former friends. Her gaze sharpens with hidden intent as she prepares to challenge the man who allowed this nightmare to happen. Fury boils over as Juno seizes Ed's uniform, screaming in a desperate demand to know why he didn't stop this. She accuses him of viewing her as a mere tool, her eyes burning with the betrayal of a lifelong bond. Thump. Ed looks away in shame, unable to meet her gaze as he struggles to justify his complicity. A hollow, mocking smile crosses Juno's face as she stares at the man who has become her captor's accomplice. With a chilling finality, Ed delivers the order that Juno must proceed with the wedding to Leif immediately.
Juno erupts in outrage, finding the idea of marrying her father's killer so soon after his death utterly repulsive.
Ed argues that the marriage is a political necessity to stop further bloodshed and stabilize the fractured country. The thought of a usurper taking her father's throne through her own hand fills Juno with absolute searing disgust. Towering over her, Ed insists that her cooperation is the only way to save what remains of the kingdom. Realizing she is cornered, Juno accepts the grim reality that her path to revenge must begin at the altar. Back at the cathedral, the princess stands at the center of the aisle, ready to face her dark destiny. Clack! Leif's confident footsteps echo through the hall as he approaches his bride with an air of cold triumph. Facing each other, Leif demands they finish the ceremony quickly, while Juno clarifies she is only marrying his title. Turning to the trembling priest, Juno coldly commands him to skip the kiss and the traditional exchange of rings.
As she looks at her hand, she recalls the ring Leif cruelly forced upon her the night before. Snatch! Leif seizes her hand, arrogantly declaring that he alone will decide how the ceremony proceeds.
Slide! A sparkling new ring is forced onto her finger, sealing her fate to the man she now loathes.
Juno stares at the ring in shock, her eyes widening as she recognizes the significance of the precious stone.
A memory of a kinder Leif offering a similar gift flashes through her mind, heightening her current pain. Pulled into a forceful kiss, Juno hears Leif's whisper about the ring matching the color of her eyes. Tears stream down her face during the suffocating embrace, her heart breaking under the weight of his cruel irony.
The scene returns to the image of her father, a painful reminder of the peace she has lost forever.
Bittersweet visions of a loving kiss haunt Juno, a stark contrast to the hollow reality of her current union. A single crystal tear escapes her closed eyes, carrying the weight of her profound grief and shattered expectations. Within the blinding light of the cathedral, the pair shares a kiss that marks the beginning of a nightmare. Dressed in elaborate wedding finery, the princess keeps her gaze lowered, her heart hardening against her new husband. Leif leads her through the palace, reminding her that Barao was always destined to be the nation she inherited. A thud echoing from his chest, Juno lashes out in desperation, demanding answers for the betrayal that destroyed her world. Leif coldly announces they will greet the subjects as the new monarchs, leaving Juno reeling from his calculated audacity. Her red eyes burn with unbridled fury as she realizes the extent of the monster her former lover has become. The doors creak open to reveal a bright, mocking sky, signaling the start of their public debut as rulers.
Juno is met with the horrifying sight of a cheering crowd, their joyous shouts for the usurper king chilling her soul. She watches in disbelief as the man who murdered her father is hailed as a great ruler by her own people. The citizens smile and celebrate, oblivious to the blood on their new king's hands or the princess's internal agony. Standing on the balcony, Juno feels a crushing isolation as she realizes it wasn't Leif who changed, but the world.
Her sense of reality shatters as the world turns upside down, leaving her adrift in a sea of political treachery. A soft glow illuminates a memory of a peaceful gazebo, where the promise of a happy wedding once felt real.
In the past, a smiling Leif assured her that any wedding would be perfect as long as she was there. His gentle words and warm gaze were the perfect mask, hiding the ruthless ambition that would eventually consume them both. Returning to the present, Juno lies motionless in her dark chambers, a captive queen in her own ancestral home. A quick creak sounds at the door as Juno realizes her gown is meant for a wedding night she dreads. She stares at the delicate lace with horror, knowing the man she now loathes expects her to fulfill her role.
A soft click precedes the door sliding open, revealing the imposing silhouette of her captor husband entering the shadows.
Leif stands amidst dark roses, his open robe revealing a powerful physique and a cold, triumphant expression. Juno's breath hitches as she faces the man who turned her life into a living hell, her fear turning to rage. With a mocking shrug, Leif scoffs at the idea of sharing a bed with a woman who wants him dead. He looms over her, his whisper a poisonous challenge as he asks if her resolve to kill him is wavering.
Smash! Juno hurls a vase in a fit of rage, refusing to let him mock her pain and humiliation.
She seizes a sharp shard, pressing it against Leif's throat in a desperate, lethal gamble for her lost dignity. Her red eyes glare with murderous intent as she brands him the cold-blooded executioner of her beloved father. Thud, Leif easily overpowers her, pinning her to the bed and reminding her of the vast difference in their strength. Their faces are inches apart in a suffocating struggle, the air thick with mutual hatred and suppressed violence. He encourages her to burn with rage, arrogantly claiming she is completely incapable of taking his life. Leif issues a chilling warning, reminding her that any defiance will bring further suffering to the people of Barao. Stunned by his cowardice, Juno realizes he is using her subjects as human shields to ensure her total compliance.
Having asserted his dominance, the commander walks away, leaving her broken and shivering upon the bed.
The door creaks shut as Leif delivers his final order, confining her to the room until he decides otherwise. Bam! The heavy door slams shut, sealing Juno inside a luxurious prison where her only company is her own despair. She looks at her trembling hands, the weight of her situation feeling like a terminal sentence she cannot escape. A single sob breaks the silence as the princess calls herself pathetic, her spirit nearly broken by the day's horrors. The next morning, a maid arrives with a rattle of tea, marking the start of her first day as a captive. Juno observes the unfamiliar woman from Ellist, realizing her own staff has been replaced by the enemy's watchful eyes. She recalls how her own people once cared for her, contrasting those memories with the current cold surveillance. Looking out the window, Juno seethes at the insult of being treated like a dangerous animal in her own palace. When she asks to walk the grounds, the maid's silence speaks volumes about her new, restricted status. The maid strictly denies her request, stating that orders have been given to keep the princess under constant watch. Ellist soldiers patrol the corridors, their presence a constant reminder that the castle is now an occupied fortress. The servant offers a stern warning, advising the princess to abandon any foolish thoughts of escape or rebellion.
Juno remains silent, her mind racing as she contemplates the risks of running away from her golden cage. Under the cover of night, she dons a dark cloak, her eyes fixed on the moonlit path to freedom. She remembers Leif's words about the fate of the people, wondering if her disappearance would truly destabilize his rule. Visions of Bera's saintly bloodline fade as she realizes her father, like Leif, was a Scarlet who married into royalty. Narrative text explains that Juno's father became king of Barao by marrying her mother, the true royal heir.
Juno reflects on the crowd's fanatical cheers, suspecting the people remain oblivious to Leif's true, murderous nature.
Under the moonlight, the princess resolves to reach House Scarlet to reveal the truth and reclaim her fallen kingdom. Juno observes the castle corridors, confirming her fears that the palace is now completely overrun by watchful Elest soldiers. A sudden loud clatter rings out as Juno accidentally strikes something, instantly alerting the guards to her hidden presence. A quick patter of footsteps sounds as the soldiers scramble toward the noise, sensing someone lurking in the darkness. Panic flares in Juno's red eyes as she desperately searches for a place to hide from the approaching guards. The Elest soldiers shout in triumph as they spot movement, certain they have finally cornered their elusive royal prey. Finding only a shattered vase on the floor, the confused soldiers realize their target has vanished into the shadows. Footsteps fade into the distance as the soldiers split up, leaving Juno shivering and hidden within a dark, dusty room.
Juno discovers a forgotten storage chamber filled with old crates and discarded armor, a secret room she never knew existed.
Looking at the high, barred window, she wonders if this vast and unfamiliar room might offer a path to freedom. A heavy thump echoes through the chamber as a suit of armor suddenly collapses onto the stone floor before her. Concern momentarily overrides her fear as the princess leans over the fallen armor, asking if the person inside is injured. A loud clang of metal rings out as the armor lurches back to its feet with unnatural, mechanical stiffness. Horror strikes as the helmet reveals a pale, lifeless man with glowing red eyes staring blankly at the terrified princess. Terrified, Juno realizes she is facing a literal monster and turns to flee from the creature in the dark. A loud crunch sounds as the armored monstrosity reaches out with a heavy hand, relentlessly pursuing her through the room. Fear paralyzes the princess as the creature closes in, its cold presence making her certain she is about to be caught. A sudden slash cuts through the air as a man intercepts the monster, catching the falling princess in his arms. Leif glares with fierce intensity, his protective embrace a sharp contrast to the cold blood he shed for the throne. The king's sword flashes in the dim light as he shields Juno from the creature, his gaze fixed on the enemy. A sudden clash rings out while Juno looks up at Leif, breathless and deeply confused by his unexpected, heroic intervention. Juno demands to know why a monster is wearing Barao soldier armor, her voice trembling with shock and growing suspicion. Fury flashes in Leif's golden eyes as he tells her she doesn't need to know anything about the armored creature. Stunned by his explosive anger, Juno remains silent as Leif begins to forcibly escort her back to her royal prison. Tucked into her bed, Juno stares into the darkness, her mind racing with the realization that everything feels horribly wrong. Memories of the cheering crowd and the lifeless armored soldier haunt her, deepening her sense of profound dread and isolation.
Juno wonders what madness has gripped her country, recalling Leif's intense anger when she questioned the monster's identity. The next morning, a hard-eyed Juno prepares to face her captors, her spirit still flickering despite her miserable confinement.
Water sloshes in a basin as Vinette enters the room, her cold gaze fixed on the princess she deeply resents.
A sudden splash echoes as the maid deliberately pours the water over Juno's head, an act of sheer petty cruelty.
Vinette sneers at the dripping princess, calling her a filthy Barao woman for attempting to escape her restricted royal status.
The maid's face twists into a sadistic grin as she grabs Juno's hair, demanding the princess cry for her. Juno glares back with silent, burning defiance, refusing to give the cruel servant the satisfaction of a single miserable tear. A loud shout interrupts the abuse as another maid warns Vinette to stop before Lord Leif discovers her insolence. Juno turns away in chilling silence, her heart hardening against the constant waves of hatred within the palace walls. Clenching her hand, the princess asks herself why she is so deeply hated by the people of her own kingdom. Despite the unreasonable cruelty she faces, Juno resolves to straighten her back and endure the nightmare for her fallen people. Gazing out the window, the princess prepares herself for whatever trials and further humiliations the future might hold for her. Vinette's face contorts with unbridled malice as she fumes over Leif's inexplicable protection of the vile Barao woman. In his private study, Leif stares at Vinette with a chilling, authoritative gaze, reminding her of his previous strict orders. A quick tsk escapes the maid as she tries to make excuses, but Leif's cold silence cuts through her lies. Leif issues a final lethal warning, commanding Vinette to never call the princess by that derogatory term again.
Bowing in submission, Vinette trembles as she questions why the king cares so much about a mere Barao granddaughter.
The maid's obsession turns poisonous as she stares with wide, crazed eyes, convinced Leif is the only one who matters. Vinette envisions Leif as the jewel of Arist, the man destined to rule long before the fallen princess entered his life. She blames Juno for deceiving him and forcing him to rule a tainted land, fueled by her own bitter delusions. Searching through the shadows, the maid pulls out a small bottle of green liquid, her intentions turning clearly murderous. With a wicked, twisted smile, Vinette prepares the poison, determined to make the filthy princess finally understand her place.
Trapped in her royal prison, Juno gazes at the moonlight, feeling the weight of a suffocating isolation.
Her stomach growls as she reflects on the escalating harassment and the rotten food provided by her captors. Looking inward, the princess considers how the immense stress of her current life would have previously broken her. Visions of her past reveal a frail, happy woman who was constantly at the mercy of her own weakness. She finds it bitterly ironic that her burning rage against Leif has seemingly granted her a newfound healthy strength. The door opens as Vinette and other maids enter, their presence signaling the arrival of a cruel new trial. Vinette wears a sadistic grin while mockingly insisting that it would be a problem if the princess didn't eat. Brutal force replaces pretense as the maids pin Juno down, shoving a bowl of foul liquid toward her mouth. A blood-splattered vision of Leif flashes through her mind, a haunting reminder of the man who took everything. The maids sneer with shared malice as they surround the helpless princess, determined to break her spirit through force. Smash! The bowl shatters during the struggle as Juno desperately fights against the hands trying to restrain her. Clenching her teeth, Juno endures the pain of having her hair gripped while she searches for an answer. Vinette glares with intense hatred, questioning if Juno truly understands the dire situation and the animosity surrounding her. Grabbing the princess's collar, the maid screams that everything is the fault of Juno's father and his bloody war. The servant rages about the loss of Arist citizens, declaring that Juno deserves to be hated by everyone. Horror and denial fill Juno's eyes as she protests, refusing to believe her father could be responsible for such atrocities.
Venetta's face twists in agony as she reveals that Leif's younger brother, Neil, also perished because of Juno's bloodline.
A memory of a smiling, light-haired man named Neil surfaces, leaving the princess stunned by this unexpected revelation of loss.
Ignoring Juno's shock, the brown-haired maid orders the others to keep the princess pinned firmly to the ground. Vinette uncorks a small bottle filled with glowing green poison, intent on avenging Neil and the people of Elist. With a murderous glare, the maid demands Juno pay for the fallen with her life, looming over her victim. The struggle intensifies as Vinette forces the atonement upon her, while the other maids maintain their crushing grip. Darkness and malice fill the air as the servant prepares to force the lethal liquid. A splash of green poison enters Juno's mouth, as she is labeled a useless relic of a fallen kingdom.
Vinette screams for Juno to disappear, pinning her down as the princess begins to feel the poison's lethal effects.
Juno's red eyes widen in agony as a burning sensation spreads across her tongue, signaling the start of the end. Kya! A piercing scream of pain erupts from the princess as her body begins to emit a strange, glowing light. Tears fall as Juno's internal despair peaks, her mind racing with the realization that she hasn't learned the truth. Collapse. The princess falls limp as Vinette looks on with triumph, believing the wicked princess has finally met her end. Sunlight or divine magic begins to surge through Juno's body, her white hair glowing with an intense, otherworldly power. Flash, an explosive burst of golden light radiates from Juno, throwing the startled maids back and filling the room.
Vinette stares in absolute disbelief, her eyes wide with terror as she witnesses the impossible transformation unfolding before her.
As she lies suspended in light, the green poison is miraculously expelled from her lips in glowing, harmless beads. Floating above the floor like a saintly apparition, Juno is bathed in a divine aura that defies her intended death. The remaining poison erupts in a surge of energy, leaving the room in a state of chaotic, magical upheaval. Standing guard outside, a soldier's attention is instantly captured by the high-pitched scream echoing through the royal halls.
Alerted by the commotion, Leif and his men stop in their tracks, sensing that something has gone horribly wrong.
Without hesitation, the king and his subordinates sprint toward the source of the noise, their footsteps thundering on the carpet.
Bam! Leif kicks the door open, demanding to know the meaning of the chaos as he finds the maids cowering.
He stands frozen at the sight of Juno floating amidst a celestial display of light and blooming white flowers. A look of profound shock and bewilderment crosses Leif's face as he witnesses the princess's sudden divine manifestation. The light fades as Juno's unconscious form begins to descend, her long white hair trailing like a silken cloud. A brown-haired subordinate catches the falling princess while Leif notices the small, empty poison bottle on the floor. Cowering in fear, Vinette realizes the gravity of her actions as she stares at the approaching, furious king. The maid's mind fractures as she delusionally believes Leif's concern is directed at her instead of the unconscious princess. Leif's golden eyes burn with a lethal intensity as he grabs Vinette's face, demanding she reveal what she gave Juno. A sharp blade is pressed against the maid's throat as the king threatens her with immediate death for her insolence. Gasp! Terrified for her life, Vinette stammers out the name of the lethal Belso poison she used on the princess. Recognizing the danger, Leif barks an order for immediate healing magic to save Juno from the poison's grasp. With a voice of ice, the king sentences Vinette to permanent exile in the desolate and distant Beacon Highlands. Leif coldly orders his soldiers to throw the remaining maids into the dungeon for their insolence and betrayal. Vinette's face twists into a mask of pure terror as she hears her sentence of immediate, life-threatening exile.
The brown-haired servant begs for mercy, dreading the monster-infested wilderness of the Beacon Highlands where she'll surely perish. Leif's golden eyes flash with lethal intent as he calculates her survival time with a chilling, heartless smile. Tears of despair stream down the maid's face as she realizes her pleas are falling on deaf, unforgiving ears.
A desperate scream erupts as soldiers forcibly drag Vanette away while Leif commands his men to clear the room. A red-haired man supports the pale and trembling Juno as she gazes at the king with lingering shock.
Leif remains in somber silence, his thoughts consumed by the heavy toll of the war and Neil's tragic end. Juno looks down with a sorrowful expression, the weight of the kingdom's losses pressing heavily upon her spirit. The princess whispers the word uncle as she notices a small, dark-haired boy standing tentatively beside the king. Colin, the young child of royal blood, stares back with wide eyes that mirror Leif's own piercing golden gaze. Juno's eyes widen in disbelief as she realizes the small boy is the living legacy of her late brother-in-law. Leif beckons Colin forward, and the boy approaches with hesitant footsteps that echoes softly across the ornate floor. A haunting vision of a smiling, light-haired Neil appears, emphasizing the boy's heartbreaking resemblance to his fallen father.
Leif offers a cold smirk, informing Juno that he has found a new, mandatory duty for her to fulfill. Appointing Juno as the boy's guardian, Leif warns her that any harm to the child is her absolute responsibility.
With a voice of ice, the king commands Juno to serve and protect the young royal with her life. Juno stands in a daze, overwhelmed by the sudden burden and the fading memories of her once happy family. A warm memory surfaces of Neil calling out to Juno, his face bright with joy and genuine affection. Juno recalls the light-hearted days when she expressed her pride in having such a sweet and kind little brother. The past reveals a rare moment of tenderness as Leif holds a blushing Juno within a sun-drenched garden. A broken hourglass lies discarded in the darkness, its spilled red sand symbolizing the shattered remnants of their lives.
Returning to the present, Leif formally designates Juno as the caretaker while a servant helps her stay upright. A look of profound horror crosses Juno's face as she accepts the grim reality of her new, forced existence.
Looking at her blood-stained attire, the princess laments that a young child was forced to witness such gruesome violence.
Juno tries to offer a comforting hand to the trembling Colin, her heart breaking for the boy's immense loss. Colin's grief explodes into volatile magic as he screams his defiance, the energy crackling painfully around the startled princess. Overwhelmed by his own surging power, the terrified boy turns and bolts from the room in a blind panic.
A heavy thud sounds as Colin sprints down the long hallway, desperate to leave the traumatic scene behind him.
An oppressive, tense silence descends upon the room as Juno and Leif share a cold and wordless confrontation. A sharp gasp escapes as Leif grabs Juno's arm, causing a sudden and blinding flare of magical energy. Leif tells her the man she once knew is dead, a fact Juno realizes she has known all along.
Tears well in Juno's red eyes as she finally accepts that the warmth of the past has truly withered.
Leif explains that Colin is dangerously unstable, making Juno's presence essential to prevent the child's neglect and demise.
The princess reacts with burning indignation at Leif's cold assessment of a 6-year-old's profound grief and suffering. Leif dismissively promises a replacement maid before ordering Juno to wait quietly for the next stage of her imprisonment. Juno calls after him in a desperate attempt to continue the argument, but the king remains completely unmoved. Silence fills the hallway as Leif strides away, leaving Juno alone with the weight of her new responsibilities.
Walking through the palace, Juno notes the poison has left her system, though the night's horrors prevent any sleep. The princess reflects on the mysterious, glowing phenomenon that saved her, wondering what strange power has been awakened. Juno's heart grows heavy as she contemplates the impossible task of caring for a child while her own life crumbles. Loud rhythmic thuds sound as servants frantically demand entrance into the boy's room to check on his well-being. Arriving at the door, Juno asks the worried staff for an update on the situation with the young lord.
A maid explains that Colin has refused all nourishment since Neil's death, wasting away in his solitary mourning. Juno points out that his behavior is merely a tragic testament to the deep love he felt for his father.
Declaring her intent to take charge, Juno reminds the staff that Leif has placed the boy's care in her hands. With a reassuring smile, the princess tells the servants to leave the delicate matter of the boy's health to her. Within the dark and quiet room, a lonely figure huddled on the bed stares into the shadows of grief.
Juno prepares herself for the challenge ahead, knowing that her first goal must be to get the child to eat.
A soft, tentative knock sounds as Juno calls the boy's name through the door, hoping to reach his heart. Clatter! The door rattles violently as Juno realizes the young boy's unstable magic is reacting directly to his volatile emotions. Leaving a tray of sandwiches and sweets outside the door, Juno gently encourages the grieving child to try and eat. Staring at a handwritten note on the floor, Colin's golden eyes fill with suspicion and deep-seated sadness. Standing alone in the shadows, the boy bitterly assumes the princess is only visiting him because of his uncle's commands.
Tears stream down Colin's face as he concludes that she, like everyone else, doesn't actually care about his suffering.
Knocking softly on the ornate wood, Juno tries once more to reach the boy by inviting him to join her for dinner. An oppressive silence hangs in the hallway as the princess waits for a response that does not come.
Juno reflects on her own past despair, wondering if her desire to save the child is just a selfish projection.
Haunted by memories of her kingdom's fall, the princess recalls how desperately she once craved having a single person on her side. Looking at the quiet room, Juno questions if she is merely forcing her own unhealed feelings onto the innocent child. With a look of profound compassion, she realizes her true wish was simply to be a friend to the lonely boy. Crack! The door begins to splinter as a sudden surge of dark magic erupts from within the young lord's chambers. Panic grips Juno as she screams for Colin, terrified that the child has been consumed by his own surging power. Boom! The room explodes in a whirlwind of magical energy and flying books as Colin collapses amidst the swirling chaos. Gasping in horror, the princess rushes into the room as the boy lies trembling on the floor, wreathed in shadows. Ignoring the warnings of the startled servants, Juno charges through the stinging magical storm to reach the suffering child. The air crackles with intensity as Juno cries out Colin's name, her voice barely audible over the roaring magical gale. Slashing magic leaves small cuts on her skin, but the princess refuses to stop until she reaches the center of the storm. The boy gasps for breath, his small body racked by the strain of the uncontrollable energy leaking from his spirit. Sobbing for his late father, Colin confesses his crushing fear of being left all alone in the cold world. A warm vision of a smiling Neil patting his son's head emphasizes the devastating void left by the man's death. In the dark depths of his mind, the boy laments that there is no one left to save him from his grief. Colin's eyes widen in absolute shock as he feels a pair of warm arms suddenly pull him into a firm embrace. Defying the dangerous aura, Juno holds the boy tightly, her long white hair whipping around them in the magical wind. Looking into his tearful eyes, the princess offers her friendship and a simple promise to eat their meals together, The magical storm begins to fade as the two share a moment of genuine connection on the cold floor. Burying his face in her shoulder, the boy continues to weep for the meals he will never share with his father. A golden memory surfaces of the boy eating happily with Neil, highlighting the simple joys he misses so much. Colin's face is a mask of pure, raw sorrow as he finally lets out the grief he has been holding inside.
With a gentle and tearful smile, Juno cradles the child, offering the silent comfort he so desperately needed.
Startled maids and an officer burst into the room, calling out for the young master and the princess in alarm. Keeping a firm grip on the trembling boy, Juno urgently commands the servants to fetch a doctor for him immediately. As Colin is carried away, Juno reflects on the storm of malice she felt while holding his warm, fragile body. Looking at her scratched and bloodied hand, the princess wonders if she is truly capable of caring for such a child. Tears of relief fall as Juno realizes that being able to help the boy has begun to heal her own spirit.
Clink! The scene shifts to a bright garden where Juno sits peacefully, her attention caught by a sudden sound.
A much healthier Colin peeks around a stone pillar, his face lighting up with a cheerful and bright smile.
Surprise and joy cross Juno's face as she greets the young boy, who is now looking vibrant and happy.
Approaching with hesitant but eager steps, the dark-haired boy tries to find the words to speak to the princess. Surrounded by blooming sunflowers, Colin holds out a hand and shyly asks if Juno will join him for lunch. Overwhelmed by the boy's sweet gesture, the princess beams with happiness as she accepts his invitation to the garden. Seated at a table laden with tea and treats, Colin proudly mentions that he helped prepare the afternoon's refreshments. Juno closes her eyes contentedly as she sips her tea, savoring the rare moment of tranquility in her new life. The princess wishes that the world could always be this peaceful, as if the cruelties of the past never happened. Noticing a change in her expression, Colin looks up with concern and asks if his friend is feeling unwell.
Juno laughs softly to herself, finding it ironic that she is finding such peace despite her lingering thirst for revenge.
A brown-haired man named Ed approaches the table, remarking on the lovely scene as Juno warmly greets him. Colin eagerly offers Ed a seat and some tea, prompting the man to smile and accept a single cup. The boy runs off toward the tea cart to pick out a special cup, leaving Juno and Ed alone together. Watching the boy run with such energy, Juno tells Ed how relieved she is to see Colin smiling so often. Ed smiles at Juno, noticing her improved mood during their peaceful afternoon tea in the garden. Juno listens as Ed remarks on her brighter appearance, though her eyes remain thoughtful and distant. Ed encourages the princess to find strength in supporting others as she sips her tea in silence. Juno reflects on cutting off the cycle of hatred by living for the sake of the innocent children. Contemplating the fallen King Neil and her father, Juno wonders if moving forward is her only path. Haunted by memories of war and the potential end of the royal bloodline, Juno grapples with the truth. Her hands tremble over her cup as the princess admits her fear of being consumed by surrounding malice. A cheerful Colin smiles brightly, finding simple joy in the tea and the company of his new friend. Seeing the boy's newfound courage, Juno feels a spark of hope ignite within her own weary heart. The princess offers a gentle smile, resolving to find her own strength to look toward the future. That night, the scene shifts to Leif's private chambers as the king stands alone in the shadows. Sitting in the dim light, Leif remains motionless with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable and stern. The king stares into the void of his room, lost in his own dark and heavy thoughts. Juno enters the chamber looking ethereal, her white dress contrasting with the gloom and the surrounding flowers. Standing before the seated king,
Juno formally states she has a request, while Leif listens in silence.
Juno points out that her purpose has faded now that he is king, causing Leif to rise abruptly. She expresses her desire to live a meaningful life by being helpful to someone else besides him.
Thud. Leif suddenly lunges forward and pins Juno against the door with a terrifying, violent intensity.
His eyes flash with a golden light as he looms over the startled and breathless princess.
Leif possessively demands she stay by his side forever, regardless of the suffering or what she becomes. Gripping her shoulder tightly, the king vows to ensure she never speaks of leaving him ever again. A primal roar echoes through the room as Leif's overwhelming presence traps Juno against the ornate door. Struggling against his iron grip, the princess desperately screams for him to let her go.
Left alone, Juno looks at her bruised skin, mourning the loss of the kind man she once knew.
In the hallway, Leif clutches his head in a moment of clarity, questioning his own monstrous behavior.
The next morning, maids help the princess into a new gown, though the mood remains somber.
Touching her injured shoulder, Juno asks the worried servants to leave so she can dress herself in private.
The maids bow respectfully and exit the room, leaving the princess alone with her painful thoughts.
Juno realizes Leif is hiding a dark secret, noticing his irrational anger whenever she seeks information. Images of his possessive outburst haunt her, confirming that he is no longer the Leif of her past. Convinced he is concealing something terrifying, Juno prepares herself to face the dangers of the palace.
A vision of a cracked and shadowy figure symbolizes the darkness hidden beneath the king's composed exterior. Gripping her attire, the princess resolves that she cannot allow herself to be paralyzed by fear. Standing with renewed determination, Juno vows that she must not run away from the challenges ahead. She reflects that true revenge means protecting the people from chaos, even if it requires his blood.
With sharp focus, Juno concludes that her first step is to uncover every secret the king has hidden.
Reaching for the handle, the princess prepares to step out and begin her clandestine investigation. Clack! The door opens as a cheerful Colin surprises the princess with a bright greeting.
Excitedly pumping his fist, the young boy exclaims that her appearance is perfect timing for his plans. Colin asks Juno to join him for breakfast, appearing much calmer and healthier than the previous day.
The princess looks at the boy with surprise, her plans shifting as she considers his request. Realizing this is the perfect opportunity to move freely, Juno sees a chance to explore the palace. With a warm smile, she agrees to his invitation, seeing the boy as a key to her goal. Colin happily pulls the princess down the hallway, eager to show her the wonders of the castle. Juno notes that Leif cannot easily confine her as long as she is fulfilling her role as caretaker. Juno remains vigilant, knowing that her proximity to the boy grants her access to forbidden areas. Though she feels a pang of guilt for using Colin's curiosity, Juno prioritizes uncovering the king's secrets. Colin excitedly reveals his desire to visit the legendary room filled with mountains of books. Juno chuckles at his enthusiasm for the archives, despite being warned of its dust and dangerous miasma. In a hazy memory, a gray-haired man gently comforts a young, white-haired girl while she rests in bed. Back in the present, Juno and Colin share a joyful laugh, their bond growing stronger with every moment. Juno recalls Leif standing over a fallen body, noting that her health has strangely improved since that day. A portrait of the smiling, gray-haired King Neil appears, representing the peaceful and warm past he once ruled. Colin gazes in absolute wonder at the massive library archives, amazed by the sheer number of ancient books. The duo explores the vast archives, noting the unusual cleanliness and absence of dust in the Grand Hall. Juno feels a mysterious magnetic pull toward a locked door that the young boy is struggling to open. Creak!
A blinding light pours out as the door suddenly opens, leaving Colin cheering in pure excitement. Startled, the princess stares at her hand, feeling as though her body was momentarily moved by an outside force. Colin rushes headlong into the dark room, while Juno urgently calls out for the young boy to wait. A heavy sense of dread washes over Juno as she senses a darkness hidden within the newly opened room. Reaching for the boy, the princess calls his name again, her face pale with a growing, unspoken anxiety.
Juno is struck with horror upon seeing rows of glowing red bottles filling the shelves of the secret room.
A cold sweat breaks out on her face as the princess experiences an unsettlingly familiar and strange feeling.
Memories of a past incident involving intense magical energy and a similar atmosphere begin to haunt her mind. Standing frozen in the dim light, Juno clutches her chest as the room's oppressive aura weighs on her. Steeling her resolve, the princess vows to protect Colin despite her own mounting fear and deep confusion. Colin cheers with unbridled joy, completely unaware of the dark history and danger surrounding them in the shadows. Noticing her distress, the boy looks back and innocently asks if the princess is afraid of dark places. The young boy reaches out to hold her hand, promising to lead her through the room this time. Touched by his bravery, Juno looks down at the child with a mixture of sadness and deep affection. Looking at the red bottles, the princess realizes that she is the only one affected by the room's energy. Her eyes narrow with focus as she wonders if there is a specific reason for her visceral reaction.
Putting on a brave face, Juno tells Colin she is fine and prepares to venture further into the room.
Creak. The pair discovers a sterile area that bears a striking and disturbing resemblance to a doctor's room. Thump. A terrifying vision of a gloved hand brandishing a sharp scalpel flashes vividly across Juno's vision. In a dark memory, a shadowed figure looms over her with a blade as she wakes in confusion. The shadowy figure prepares a syringe, telling the princess to sleep as a blue light crackles nearby. The voice in her memory promises that she will have forgotten everything by the time she wakes up. Juno's eyes widen in shock as the suppressed memory finally resurfaces with a terrifyingly clear intensity. Thud. She can vividly recall the biting coldness of the metal examination bed from that forgotten dark night. Breathless, the princess questions the identity of the person who experimented on her in this hidden place.
Colin suddenly hugs her, his small arms providing a grounding warmth that snaps her back to reality.
Colin looks up with a determined face, mentioning that she has someone very strong to rely on. The boy confidently states that because her uncle is so powerful, there is nothing to be scared of.
Colin reveals that he once saw his perpetual uncle calling out her name, June, while he was fast asleep. Juno stands in stunned silence, processing the revelation about the king's hidden feelings and calling out her name. Thud! The princess returns the boy's hug, whispering a soft thank you for his unexpected and sweet comfort. Juno closes her eyes, savoring the simple hug while the mysteries of the room continue to swirl around. Looking at the rows of red potions, she wonders why this forbidden place feels so hauntingly familiar.
Colin urges her to leave the room quickly, sensing that they have spent enough time in the dark.
The boy's face remains filled with an earnest desire to see his friend feel safe and happy again. Juno feels a wave of self-loathing, calling herself useless for allowing a child to worry about her.
Looking back down the corridor of red jars, the princess notes that the hallway isn't actually very long.
Despite the short distance, the oppressive atmosphere makes the walk feel endless and filled with growing dread.
Juno reflects on her mission to find clues, realizing the secret life is hiding is becoming clearer.
They reach a corner where the shelves end, but the darkness feels as though it has only thickened.
Relieved to be nearing the exit, Juno's eyes are suddenly drawn to a specific bottle on the shelf.
Her heart stops as she sees a decorative red jar with a tag bearing the name Fenora. Overwhelmed by a sudden, agonizing physical pain, the princess collapses as Colin screams her name in panic. Juno reels with shock as she connects the name on the bottle to her mother, her consciousness fading into darkness. Panic-stricken, Colin pleads with the unconscious princess to wake up as he desperately tries to pull her back from the brink. Creak, Juno struggles to regain her strength for Colin's sake, unaware that the heavy archive door is slowly swinging open behind them. Thud, the king's imposing figure looms over the pair, his shadow casting a dark and heavy weight across the forbidden room.